Okay, in this video I'm going to be talking about using the Procreate Viscom Brush set I have along with the sample pages here. So we have a blank texture page, a blank warm gray, and a blank cool gray. The properties for the three of these is that they're 8.5 by 11 landscape orientation at 300 dpi. Let's go in. How do I normally use them? I keep these three templates here. I will swipe to duplicate one of them and then open that one up to start using it. If I am responsible, before I even open up, if I know what project I'm doing, demo brushes, I will label it so I don't have to worry about labeling it later on. Inside of this file, right, I have the background color set to 50% gray. I have 3 layers, one for marker, one for pen, and one for highlights, because that's typically how I approach sketching my physical pages. Is I do marker first, then I do my pen work, then I do my highlights. So let's look at some of the sample marker brushes in this set. Right, so if I have on my marker layer, go to my brushes here, where we have a series of brushes here. I have my marker chisel tip, broad tip, and fat tip. So typically I'll do titles with my broad tip. The broad tip is meant to be only, even if you change the size here, right, it doesn't change too much because it's fixed at this set size of what a marker chisel tip might be. But you can change the opacity, right? So I might start off with, say, a 10 or 20% gray. So let's just do about 22%. That's okay. And I will do, right, a title right here. Again, the tip does have an orientation to it. So when we go this way, it is fat, and when we go this way, it's a little narrower. So if you want to get that fat angle, that fat tip, in any other direction, you do have to rotate your page, right? Because it will just follow the page orientation there. Next, again, just showing off the chisel tip, right? The chisel tip is a thinner tip that I might typically use for doing some sketches, some underlay work. Right. Rotating the page just like I do with a physical page. Overdrawing some of my lines, it's better to have more than to have less. So that is how I approach using that chisel tip. And then we have this fat marker tip, just in case you need cover some larger area quicker. Oops. Okay, we can just undo that, drop it down so it's not 100%. Again, about 20%, so it's the same as the ones we've done before. Right. And of course, we can also layer these brushes up together to get darker with those opacities. Okay, so what is next after the markers? Right, let's go on to our pen layer. Some of the pens we have here, we have the calligraphy 3mm and the calligraphy 1mm. I typically use that for my titles. So that is how I write my titles. And then we have, again, the 1mm is the same brush, just calibrated to be 1mm large. This is a subtitle. So these are modeled after real-world calligraphy pens. So from the calligraphy pen, we can go over to the felt tip pens. We have, again, 3mm, 5mm, 0.7mm, and 1mm. Let's go with the 5. That's what I might typically use for something like this. Just to make sure we're in the pen layer. Again, so for this, draw all the lines. Actually, let's go with a 3 at first, right? So draw all the lines that we can't see. Rotate the page here. Rotate the page there. Right. So there's all the lines in 3mm. Let's jump up to 7 for my outlines here. Right, so slowing down a little bit as I sketch those. Trying to go over my first line as cleanly as possible. All the same techniques I use when I'm drawing physically. Right. So there we have it. Again, we also have the 5mm and the 1mm, which work the same way. So we have a couple other tools here, such as the pencil. This is pretty much very close to Procreate's standard pencil here. Not too much different, but that's how I might fill in highlights. Because it's digital and it's hard to control that tip of the pencil, I might actually do a little cover here to keep me in the lines. And again, switch to my highlights. Hold the pencil on end, right, to get that broad stroke in there. Again, we can turn that off also, and if we want to, right, do a little highlight like this, or like that, we can. I simulate gel pens actually just by going back and picking out one of my felt tips, right, and doing the same thing that I might do with a gel pen, right, with that felt tip, just with the white right there. What other pens do we have that I haven't gone over yet? Again, we have a felt tip bold, so let's go back to our pen layer. We have a felt tip bold, and it's a pretty much like a, oops, and let's make that black. Pretty much like a Sharpie, right? Just bigger. It is a square tip. Again, we change the size and it doesn't have that much change because it's a fixed size. We can change the opacity, but typically with a felt tip like that, it is going to be pretty thick. So I probably won't change that too much. All right, still in the pen layer. What else we have? This question mark, adjustable W/O, that's adjustable width and opacity. So I actually play with this. Here, this is the one tool where I allow myself to, again, play with the opacity, play with the size of the brush. Most of the other brushes, again, are fixed, so they're consistent. So with this one, again, we have the like changing opacity, the changing width. Again, we can make it darker and thinner, bolder. But this is one that when I print it out, right, I don't know exactly what size it is going to be. The rest of them are calibrated so that if I print out at 300 dpi, they're going to be the exact same size as real world paper. One of the last tools we have left, we have a square brush. Again, this one is just for fun. It is not calibrated to anything, so you can play with the size of it. And of course the opacity of it. But there is no reference for this brush in the real world. For scale, hard brush, soft brush, these are Procreates, but I have them in there because typically I do use the particularly soft brush right here for coming back in here and say doing some fill, right? If I want a smooth, if I want a smooth gradient in there, right, it's just easier to do it with the brush. As if we were doing old school airbrush or trying to blend out a marker. Speaking of blending out the marker, that's another thing I do. Because the marker, again, doesn't blend too well, if I do end up using the marker, I then grab the smudge tool, and again I have my smudge tool currently set on that soft brush so that I can blend this together just a little bit more. On the right, oh, that should be because I should be on the marker layer, which means I just did my value there on the wrong layer, but we'll worry about that later. Again, so we can try and make a smoother blend between these. For that gradient, if I was using the marker again with a physical marker, it'd be much easier to do that. So we do have that option to take that blend again with the smudge tool, because currently there isn't a blending technique that is similar enough to blending wet markers that I've found. And again, so these ones are hard brush, soft brush, round brush. You know, they're just free with Procreate, but I do have them in my set because I typically use them for that. So I kind of want to have them all together for you. So what else? Again, this one that we were just looking at, right, was based off the cool gray demo. We have the exact same one over here with the blank warm gray page. Again, we have, oh, we don't have those layers, so I need to make those. But we do have those layers here, right? Highlight, pen, and marker. And then we also have this blank texture page here. So this texture template, right? On this one, we have highlight, pen, and marker, but we also have this background right here. The background has 3 layers in there. There's a texture layer, which is what we see right now, right? I scanned some paper and put the texture in there and put it on multiply. So now we have it textured on the white. We can turn on the warm, and now we have it textured on the warm, and we can turn on the cool, and now we have it textured on the cool gray. The reason I have all of these separated like this is because this file is about 30 megabytes because of that texture in there, whereas this file here is only about 30 or 40K, so much larger, right? So most of the time I'm using these ones. We can always grab the texture from here and import to something later on if we want to, but most of the time I'm using these two just to keep this file sizes small. This texture here is just optional. Why do I have separate warm gray, cool gray files? So that I can again just quickly duplicate it and start sketching. Very much similar to having a sketchbook and opening it up. So let's delete that so I don't get confused later on. And we have this demo page here, right, of just showing where I've taken a lot longer time to draw something. So this one sort of has everything on here. If we look at the layers, again, we have the highlight layer, which you can barely see. So let's go to our background. The texture is currently on. If we turn it off, right, it's just white. We can turn on the cool gray background, and now we can see much more clearly, right, some of the marker, all the pen, and then some of the highlights all over this. Or I can just come up to my highlight layer and turn it off and turn it back on again. I can even turn off my marker layer if I want to. Speaking of turning off my marker layer, right, what I actually do here is normally when I draw, right, my marker layer is at 100%. I draw still with some opacity as if I'm choosing a 10%, a 50%, or whatever percentage value for my marker. And then I go in there after I finish my marker and drop that opacity down. You know, you can do it with whatever you want. I still like to see some of it because that's what would happen with real physical paper. So let's just leave this one at about close to 40 right here. It's fine. It doesn't have to be exact. And then do our pen on top of that, right? Now with the high contrast of the pen, that marker is kind of fading away just like it would in real life. And then we can come back and add our highlights on top of there. And that is how I use all the tools inside of the Procreate brush set that I have here. Now I want to go over, right, the value of having all of these pens calibrated to real world size and why it's important to use the page templates, right? Because the pens are calibrated at 300 dpi. So then if I want to take this and print it, I can. And to print this, right, Instead, I just get rid of my cool gray background. In fact, I also get rid of my texture because I just take it and print it on this warm gray paper here, and get this, and it translates pretty much one-to-one of being the real world size. So it's a little dark, but I've done it on a couple sample papers here, and lastly this one here. So this one's the lightest. Let's work with this, and we can do a little test here, to see that the marker strokes, are the same size as they were. Actually, that was the marker strokes are the same size, as what I did digitally. As are the pen thicknesses. So this is a 0.5 right here. I can put it next to some of my other 0.5s that I was doing, and they blend together very well because it's calibrated to be the exact same size. If I want to, of course, I could even touch it up. Now, because of this and clearing away the highlights there, I can go ahead and add the highlights back to this again, because I was saving ink by only printing the black and white on tone paper. Of course, you take your full thing here and print it on white paper, and you'll get those highlights, but you'll use a lot of ink. Again, the value here with this one is that I use less ink, though I do have to fill in my whites again if I want those in there. But this way, again, both my things I draw by hand, physically, analog, will match things I draw digitally, so I now blend the two of them together and have them in my portfolio together, matching much closer. And the things I learn when I use my hand match up better. So I hope you enjoy using all of these tools. Thank you.